All right, guys, we are back in my garage for another video, and today I want to answer the age-old question a lot of you guys are asking: how to know you have a Gen 1.5 B58. And I can answer that really quickly. You don't. So I think that's all we have for today. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope this helps. No, but in all seriousness, I know a lot of you guys probably have seen people talking about a Gen 1.5 B58. I've seen people asking, are the injectors more reliable? Does the car make more power? Is it more efficient? Is it stronger? And just everything I've seen is kind of making me confused, because these cars have been out for over 10 years at this point, and it still seems like every once in a while we try to rewrite history. So I'm going to try to share with you guys the information that I have to help address all of these questions or thoughts about a Gen 1.5 B58 existing. I know a lot of you guys are probably going to disagree with me and say that I'm missing something, but again, I've owned a B58 since 2017. I bought the car brand new, and it's one of the ones that people are telling me is a Gen 1.5, and I just don't know it. So this will hopefully answer the questions you guys might have if you're looking for a Gen 1.5 or wondering what the differences are, and kind of hopefully put this whole thing to rest. So let's go ahead and talk about it, and hopefully you guys find this video useful.
Now, as always, for everybody that's new to the channel, I create these videos to help keep you updated on the latest developments in our community, as well as discuss technical topics so that we have a better understanding of how our engines work. So if you're interested in more videos like that, be sure to subscribe, because there will be a lot more coming out in the future.
So to be clear and make sure everybody's on the same baseline, let's just say it. There are 3 generations of the B58 currently. These are the 3 different B58 versions that are officially recognized by BMW. The first one we call the Gen 1 B58. This one doesn't have a whole lot of different names and stuff, simply because when it came out, there were no other plans for new B58s to come out. We didn't know there were going to be a second and third generation of it. So it was just called the B58. The technical specification name for it was B58 B30M0, but they were all the same. They were all 6-port engines. They all had 11-to-1 compression. They didn't have a bunch of different styles and variations like what we see on some of the newer B58s. They were all the same. Some of them just had slightly different tunes, where it made anywhere from 320 to about 360 horsepower, coming from BMW. Now, this was originally introduced in the summer of 2015 for vehicles in the 2016 model year. And, it kind of came to different regions at different times, but that's where the first generation B58 comes from. Now, a couple years later in 2018, we got the new Gen 2 B58. So that was introduced in the summer of 2018 for 2019 model year vehicles. And this came with a lot of different changes, such as the redesigned timing chains, the higher fuel pressure from the factory, and of course the cars made a little bit more power. But this is where things got a little bit more complicated, because there were 2 different versions. There was a version with a 2-port cylinder head and a 6-port cylinder head. So we had the B58C, or the B58 B30M1, and the B58D, or the B58 B30O1. So now we kind of got the difference between the mid and upper level horsepower ratings for these engines based on the design, but they're both considered a second gen B58, also known as the B58 TU. And again, for those that don't know, TU stands for technical update. It's just kind of BMW's official nomenclature for revising an engine in the engine family. Also, I think it's interesting that the new M1 is a 2-port cylinder head, and a lot of people associate that with the mid-range, but the original M0 in the Gen 1 B58 was a 6-port cylinder head. That was just the only version they made, as they tuned up other versions with the same 6-port head. So these things are not locked or set in stone based on what we know or what we've seen. You really have to look at the details to understand what the differences are between the engines. And then in 2022, the Gen 3 B58 was introduced, and a lot of the newer cars have that now. I think the only car that doesn't have it is the M240i. So this is an engine, again, known as the 3rd Gen B58, or B58 TU2, which is the second technical update to the B58 engine family. This comes with the same 5,000 PSI, but it does come with revised emissions equipment in the cylinder head and a lot of changes to help it meet new emission standards. A lot of them actually make a little less horsepower than the higher output versions of the second gen B58, but they're paired with a mild hybrid system to make up the difference. So now you might be asking, where does the Gen 1.5 squeeze into all of this? And personally, I still feel the exact same way. This all started because of Kelford cams, and I've talked about them for several years on this channel. I originally introduced it to you guys when they first came out, and then of course I installed them in my 340i. And one of the big things you need to do when you're picking cams is make sure they're the right ones for your vehicle. And if you go to their website, you can see that they have 3 different versions for the B58 available: a Gen 1 version, a Gen 2 version, and a Gen 1.5 version. Now, when I introduced this to you guys, I specifically stated that Gen 1.5 isn't a real thing. It's just nomenclature they created to tell the difference where a design change was made at BMW, and they started using new parts. And because of those new parts, there is a different thread pitch inside of the cam. So in order for them to basically drill it out and machine it correctly and make it work with the stock components on your car, they had to make 2 different versions of the Gen 1 B58 cams, depending on the Vanos setup on your car. Now, this change was made around June or July of 2017, I believe, but the only real way to know for sure is to look at the central valve. And it's really easy to access. You remove your actuator and just put a mirror back there. And if you see it's got a hex head on the central valve, then that indicates you've got the quote unquote Gen 1 version. If it's got the spline head, then that's the quote unquote Gen 1.5. But again, this is not an official revised engine from BMW. It's just a change to the Valvetrain that needed to be controlled by Kelford so that they could sell you the right parts. This was something that they created so that they could manage their supply chain. And I feel like I saw this coming, but it seems like maybe a year or so after that, I started seeing people say Gen 1.5 B58s are better. They think they're stronger. They come with bigger turbos. They come with more reliable fuel injectors. And if you want your Gen 1 to be reliable and make more power, you need to put parts from a Gen 1.5 on your car. And yes, my 440i was built in July of 2017. So if there was a Gen 1.5, based on all the feedback people are telling me, I would have it. But I can tell you it's really no different. There are a lot of part number changes to these cars, but that is something that's completely normal. A lot of you know I worked in automotive for a while, and in manufacturing, design changes are a dime a dozen. You can revise a part number for any reason, even if it's the exact same part made with the exact same tool by the exact same company. Maybe you moved it to a different site. Maybe you moved it to a different shop. Maybe there was a material change from the supplier that couldn't provide you the same plastic or metal anymore, so you switched suppliers and you just want a way to control that change. It doesn't actually mean that anything was beefed up or improved or better. It just means that from a quality control standpoint, the OEM decided that this was something they wanted to be able to tell the difference between 2 different versions. So that is what's actually going on here. Yes, there were multiple changes made to the engine, and yes, a lot of them were around the same time, but it is not something that indicates increased reliability or horsepower capacity or anything about the B58. Rather, it's just one of many running changes that were made throughout the B58's life cycle. So again, if you look at the Valvetrain, you can see that the central valves are different after July of 2017, as well as the actual Vanos cam gear. So your Vanos control changed in July of 2017. Now you can see that the cams themselves seem to have changed in August of 2017, which could be just based on their supply chain run out date or something like that. But this is why I tell people, don't just go based off of your build date. Look at your actual central valve. It's easy enough to access, and that's the best way to tell which version of the cams you need. But the other thing is you'll see that the Vanos actuator itself didn't change. They use the exact same Vanos actuators. And I know some people have bought the wrong cams, and by simply swapping in the correct central valve that came with it, it works completely fine. So these parts are completely interchangeable. They don't change how the engine functions or drives. You just need to make sure that you pair the 2 pieces together because the threads will match. Otherwise, you won't be able to screw them together. But yeah, there are a lot of things that change. This is 100% normal, pretty much for any manufacturing environment. but especially in automotive when they're constantly trying to improve their quality control, meet customer demands, and just make things better while maintaining supply. There are going to be a lot of reasons why a part number can change that don't necessarily indicate a part is better. So that's kind of my take on all of this. Again, there is no real Gen 1.5 B58. Yes, there were a lot of running changes to the B58, just like there were for the N54 and N55 and S55 and every other engine in existence. That doesn't necessarily denote that there was a fix or change put in place that makes later model B58s better. So I think that's it for this video, for real this time. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope this helps. And if you have any other questions or comments, leave them down below.